I'm using a throwaway because my husband knows my main account. I, 35F, need advice on how to handle this situation that's completely destroyed my world. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. I've been married to my husband, 39M, for 8 years now, and for the first time in the 10 years we've been together I can't stand to see him. This man ruined our marriage and family for some 19-year-old. Divorce is the only option for me, because I don't think I will ever love him again. Let me give some background. I met my husband Clark during my residency at the hospital where we both still work. He was in hospital administration, and I was a stressed-out medical resident who kept having to deal with him about scheduling conflicts. We butted heads at first, he was stubborn about policies, and I was exhausted and short-tempered. But somehow those heated discussions turned into coffee breaks, which turned into dinner dates, and within a year we were married. The early years were great. We built our careers together, bought our dream house, and had our boys, Jack, 6, and Mike, 4. Clark was an amazing father and husband. He did midnight feedings, never complained about diapers, and always made time for date nights even when we were both exhausted. We had our issues like any couple, but we always worked through them together. At least that's what I thought. Everything changed last year when we started looking for a new babysitter. Our previous sitter, an older woman who'd been with us for years, moved away to be closer to her grandkids. Both Clark and I work demanding jobs. I'm now a pediatrician and he's the director of operations at our hospital. We needed someone reliable who could handle our regular schedules. We tried several sitters but nothing clicked. Then our next-door neighbors mentioned their daughter Maggie, 19F, was looking for work while attending community college. They'd lived next door for 5 years, and while I didn't know Maggie well, she seemed like a sweet kid. She came over for an interview and appeared perfect. She had experience from working at a summer camp, was studying early childhood education, and could work flexible hours. The boys immediately liked her, and her references checked out. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags sooner. Clark started coming home early on days Maggie was working, saying he wanted to spend more time with the boys. He'd never done that before. Then he started handling all the scheduling with her directly, saying he wanted to take that stress off my plate since I was dealing with a heavy patient load. The first clear warning sign came in July. I had a patient cancel, so I came home early without telling anyone. I walked in to find Clark and Maggie in our kitchen. She was sitting on the counter while he stood nearby, both of them laughing hysterically about something. The moment they saw me, they jumped apart like teenagers caught making out. Clark made some excuse about helping her reach a high shelf, but the energy in the room was weird. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Clark had never given me reason to doubt him before. But things kept adding up. I started finding long blonde hairs in odd places, in our guest bedroom, in Clark's car, even in our master bathroom once. Maggie was the only blonde who'd been in our house recently. Then Clark started acting strange about money. He came home one day talking about buying Maggie a new car for her birthday. When I asked why we would buy our babysitter a car, he launched into this elaborate explanation about how her old car wasn't safe enough for the boys, and wouldn't it be better for everyone if she had reliable transportation. The car he wanted to buy her was a $35,000 SUV, more expensive than both our cars. When I shut that idea down, he sulked for days. Maggie's appearance started changing too. When she first started working for us, she dressed like a typical college student, leggings, hoodies, messy bun, minimal makeup. By late summer, she was showing up in tight skirts and heels to babysit toddlers. Her makeup went from non-existent to full glam with fake lashes. She started wearing expensive perfume that I recognized as the same brand I wear. The detail that finally convinced me something was wrong was her toenail polish. My husband has always had a thing for feet. It's been part of our relationship since we started dating. His favorite is black polish, and he's always asking me to wear it. One day Maggie showed up in open-toed heels with black polish. The next week, she was barefoot in our house, against our rules, with the same polish. There's no way that was coincidence. I'm not proud of it, but I started snooping. We have a family rule that all communication with Maggie goes through our group chat so everything is transparent. But I noticed Clark clearing his text messages every night. He'd never done that before. He also started taking his phone into the bathroom when he showered, another new habit. One morning while he was in the shower, I grabbed his phone. He changed his password, but I knew his pattern. He always uses our anniversary. Sure enough, it unlocked. What I found destroyed me. There were thousands of deleted messages between him and Maggie going back months. I used a recovery program and what I found made me physically ill. It started with flirty texts about how mature she was for her age, how she understood him in ways I never could. Then came the photos, nothing explicitly nude, but lots of suggestive poses and lingerie. He sent her photos too, usually after working out. They had pet names for each other. He called her his perfect little angel. The messages got worse over time. He told her our marriage was dead and he was only staying for the kids. They planned for her to move in once I was gone. She talked about redecorating our bedroom and taking the boys shopping for school clothes like she was already their mother. The worst was when she said my sons wouldn't even miss me once they had her as their mom instead. She talked about how much better she'd be at raising them since she actually had time for them, unlike their workaholic mother. I was about to stop reading when I noticed he'd installed Snapchat. My nearly 40-year-old husband who barely uses Facebook had a secret Snapchat account. Their saved messages there were explicit. They detailed everything they'd done in our house while the boys napped, in our bed, in the shower, on the kitchen counter where we eat family meals. Feeling sick, I checked our security cameras. We have them around the house to monitor the boys. Sure enough, I found dozens of clips of them kissing and groping in the backyard, in the garage, even by the front door in broad daylight. The level of disrespect and recklessness is staggering. I've saved copies of everything, texts, photos, videos, in multiple places. But now I don't know what to do with it all. Part of me wants to send everything to their families, his work, her school. I want everyone to know what they've done. But I know I need to be smart about this. Should I get a lawyer before confronting him? Should I even bother confronting him at all? I honestly don't know if I can stomach hearing his excuses about why he threw away our family for a teenager. And what about her parents? They live right next door and trusted us with their daughter. Don't they deserve to know what kind of person she really is? I'm too ashamed to talk to friends or family yet. Every time I think about having to explain this situation, I feel physically ill. For now, I'm pretending everything is normal while I figure out my next steps. This whole situation feels surreal, like a nightmare I can't wake up from. Any advice on how to proceed would be appreciated. I know divorce is inevitable. I could never trust or respect him again after this. I just need guidance on the best way to handle this mess. Update 1 first, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. Your support and advice gave me the strength to take action. These past 2 weeks have been a roller coaster, but I'm finally ready to share what's happened. After reading all your comments, I met with a divorce attorney the next morning. She helped me understand my options and gave me a clear plan. First priority was gathering evidence and financial documents before confronting Clark. I spent a week quietly collecting everything: bank statements, retirement accounts, property records, all the evidence of their affair, plus our marriage and children's documents. I made copies of everything and stored them at my office. The attorney advised me to document all their interactions while I got my ducks in a row. So for a week, I pretended everything was normal while secretly watching them dig themselves deeper. Clark grew increasingly bold, probably thinking he was getting away with it. He started coming home even earlier, claiming work meetings got canceled. Maggie began staying later, always finding excuses to still be there when Clark got home. They thought they were being subtle, but now that I knew what to look for, their behavior was obvious. Last Friday, I finally confronted him. I waited until after Maggie left, made sure the boys were occupied with their tablets, and asked Clark to join me in our home office. I had prepared what I wanted to say, but when the moment came, I couldn't speak. Instead, I silently handed him a folder containing printouts of their text messages and stills from our security cameras. I watched his face as he flipped through the pages. The color drained from his face as he realized what he was looking at. His hands started shaking. He looked up at me several times, opening his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Finally, he tried the typical cheater script. It wasn't what it looked like. He could explain everything. She meant nothing to him. He still loved me. When I didn't respond, he switched tactics. Suddenly it was my fault. I worked too much, was emotionally unavailable, didn't appreciate everything he did for our family. He claimed he was lonely and Maggie was just there to listen. When that didn't work, he started crying, begging me not to destroy our family, saying the boys needed both parents together. I finally found my voice and told him I wanted a divorce. He immediately got angry, saying I was overreacting to what was basically just harmless flirting. He had the nerve to tell me I was trying to paint him as some kind of predator when Maggie was a consenting adult. That's when I lost it. I asked him how he'd feel if some 39-year-old man was pursuing our teenage babysitter, grooming her with expensive gifts and sexual attention. I asked if he'd be fine with Jack or Mike dating someone his age when they're 19. He had no response to that. I told him I'd already contacted a lawyer and he needed to move out immediately. He refused at first, saying it was his house too and I couldn't force him to leave. That's when I mentioned that as director of operations, he might want to consider how HR would view him sleeping with a teenage employee under his supervision. The hospital has strict policies about relationships with subordinates, and technically Maggie was an employee since we paid her through the hospital's childcare assistance program. He agreed to stay with his brother while we sort things out. Then came the hardest part, telling our families. I started with my parents. My mom cried and my dad wanted to drive over immediately to confront Clark. They were hurt but completely supportive of my decision to divorce him. They even offered to help with lawyer fees if needed. His parents were a different story. His mom actually tried to defend him, saying I must have driven him to it by prioritizing my career over my family. She brought up how often I'm on call and suggested maybe if I'd been home more, he wouldn't have been tempted by a younger woman. His dad was more reasonable. He apologized for his son's behavior and promised to talk some sense into him. The most dramatic reaction came from Maggie's parents. I went next door Saturday morning with copies of everything. Her mom broke down sobbing while her dad read through the messages. They had no idea their daughter was involved with a married man twice her age. Apparently she'd been lying to them about dating a boy from her chemistry class. Her dad was furious, not just at Clark, but at Maggie too. They'd already caught her in inappropriate situations with older men before but thought she'd learned her lesson. That night, Maggie's dad confronted Clark, who was picking up some clothes from our house. Their shouting match got so heated that 3 different neighbors called the police. No charges were filed but word spread quickly through the neighborhood. That's when things really exploded. Several other parents came forward with stories about Maggie being inappropriate with their husbands while babysitting for them. One mom found similar flirty messages between Maggie and her husband. Another caught Maggie sunbathing topless in their backyard when she thought no one was home. 2 more reported her regularly showing up to babysit in revealing clothes and making suggestive comments to the husbands. Seems this wasn't her first time pursuing married men. The boys are struggling with all the changes. They don't understand why Daddy isn't living at home anymore or why Maggie suddenly stopped coming over. I've arranged for them to start seeing a child therapist next week to help process everything. Meanwhile, Clark is trying to paint himself as the victim, telling anyone who'll listen that I'm trying to alienate his children from him. But most people who know us aren't buying it. I have another meeting with my lawyer tomorrow to discuss custody arrangements. Clark is pushing for 50-50 custody, but given the circumstances, him exposing our children to his affair and showing extremely poor judgment, my lawyer thinks we can get primary custody with supervised visitation for him. I'm dreading the fight ahead, but I know it's worth it to protect my kids. More updates to come as things develop. Thank you again for all the support and advice. It's helped me stay strong through this nightmare. Update 2: the situation has gotten even messier since my last update. What started as a personal crisis has turned into a neighborhood-wide scandal with revelations I never expected. Remember how I mentioned other parents coming forward about Maggie's inappropriate behavior? That sparked a whole investigation that revealed some truly disturbing patterns. 3 more families in our neighborhood discovered evidence of inappropriate relationships or attempts between Maggie and their husbands. 2 of those marriages have already ended in divorce, and the 3rd couple is in counseling. One wife found explicit photos Maggie had sent her husband over Instagram DMs. Another discovered her husband had been paying Maggie extra under the table for special photo shoots while his wife was at work. The 3rd caught them making out in her garage when she came home early from a business trip. Each time, Maggie played the role of the innocent teenager who was just being friendly until evidence proved otherwise. But here's the real bombshell: my husband knew about all of it. During the divorce proceedings, my lawyer obtained access to Clark's old phone backups. We found texts going back months where Maggie actually bragged to him about her previous conquests with married men. She sent him detailed stories about seducing other husbands, complete with photos and screenshots of their conversations. Clark not only knew she was a serial homewrecker, he found it exciting. They would role-play scenarios about her seducing other men while sexting. Reading their messages made me physically sick. The worst part was discovering they had a shared cloud folder full of videos and photos taken in our house, in our bed, in the shower, even in the playroom where our children spend time. The level of disrespect and disregard for our family is staggering. I had to have professional cleaners come in and replace several pieces of furniture because I couldn't stand looking at them anymore. The divorce proceedings have turned extremely nasty. Clark's lawyer is trying to paint me as an unstable workaholic who neglected her husband and children, forcing him to seek emotional support elsewhere. They actually tried arguing that his relationship with Maggie showed his dedication to our boys since he chose someone who is good with kids. The judge was not impressed by this logic, especially after seeing evidence of them being intimate in areas where our children could have walked in at any time. Meanwhile, Maggie's parents are threatening to sue both of us. They're going after Clark for predatory behavior and grooming, claiming he used his position of authority to manipulate their daughter. But they're also threatening to sue me for negligent supervision, arguing that as the primary homeowner and Maggie's employer, I should have noticed what was happening under my roof sooner. Their lawyer says I was negligent in hiring someone so young given Clark's history of inappropriate workplace relationships. That's right, turns out this isn't the first time Clark has pursued much younger women. His brother's wife finally told me about 2 incidents at his previous hospital where he was reported for making young interns uncomfortable with his attention. The cases were handled quietly and he was asked to transfer departments. I never knew about any of this. His family kept it quiet because they didn't want to ruin his career. Clark is still trying to manipulate the situation with our boys. He's been telling them that mommy is being mean and won't let him come home. Last week, he brought Maggie to his supervised visitation, claiming she was just there to help with the kids since they missed her. The supervisor immediately ended the visit and reported him. Now he's required to have a court-appointed supervisor rather than using his brother as we originally agreed. I've had to block his number because he won't stop harassing me with messages about reconciliation. One minute he's begging for another chance, the next he's threatening to ruin my reputation at work. He's been telling colleagues that I'm having a mental breakdown and making up stories about him out of jealousy. The boys are in therapy twice a week now. Their counselor says they're showing signs of anxiety and attachment issues from all the upheaval. Mike has started having nightmares and Jack is acting out at school. Every time they ask why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore, it breaks my heart all over again. The only small bright spot is that our hospital administration has been surprisingly supportive. They've allowed me to adjust my schedule to be home more with the boys, and they're conducting their own investigation into Clark's behavior with young employees. Several former interns have come forward with stories about his inappropriate comments and unwanted attention. I'm exhausted but trying to stay strong for my kids. Some days I can barely get out of bed, but I make myself keep going because my boys need me. The next custody hearing is in 2 weeks, and my lawyer feels confident we can get Clark's visitation reduced given his continued poor judgment. Update 3. I think it's time for my final update on this nightmare. A lot has happened since my last post, and while not everything is resolved, I've reached a point where I can finally breathe again. The divorce was finalized last week. After months of legal battles, I got primary custody of the boys with Clark having supervised visitation twice a month. He's required to complete both parenting classes and counseling before he can request unsupervised visits. The judge was particularly concerned about his pattern of exposing our children to inappropriate relationships and his continued poor judgment during the divorce proceedings. Clark fought the custody arrangement hard, but his case fell apart when more evidence of his inappropriate behavior emerged. 3 former hospital interns testified about his history of pursuing young employees. The hospital's investigation uncovered a pattern of him specifically requesting to mentor female interns under 25. He was forced to resign to avoid being fired. Last I heard, he's working at a private clinic in another state. Maggie's parents ultimately decided not to sue after their lawyer advised them it would only bring more negative attention to their daughter. The whole situation had already damaged her father's local business, and they wanted to avoid more scandal. They sold their house and moved to another state to get a fresh start. Through mutual friends, I heard Maggie is in therapy and taking online classes. She apparently wrote me an apology letter, but I told our old neighbors to throw it away. I don't need her words or excuses. The aftermath in our community has been complicated. 2 of the marriages Maggie helped destroy ended in divorce. One couple is trying to reconcile through counseling. Several families moved away to escape the gossip. Our neighborhood WhatsApp group imploded with people taking sides and sharing rumors. I removed myself from it months ago for my own sanity. The most shocking development came last month. Clark got married again. Not to Maggie, but to a 23-year-old waitress he met at a bar near his new clinic. They dated for 2 months before eloping, and she's already expecting a baby. Part of me feels sorry for her, knowing what I know about him, but that's not my problem anymore. I just hope she's better at spotting red flags than I was. The boys are slowly adjusting to our new normal. The therapy has helped them process everything, though they still have rough days. Jack's behavior at school has improved, and Mike's nightmares are less frequent. They see their dad during his scheduled visits, but they're not as excited about it as they used to be. His new wife tried adding them on social media and buying their affection with expensive gifts, but I've put firm boundaries in place. Clark's family is still trying to guilt me about breaking up the family. His mother sends weekly messages about how the boys need their father and I should give him another chance. I've blocked most of them except his sister, who's been surprisingly supportive and helps monitor his behavior during visits with the kids. As for me, I'm focused on healing and rebuilding. I've switched to a more flexible schedule at the hospital to spend more time with my boys. We moved to a smaller house closer to my parents, which helps with childcare and gives us a fresh start away from painful memories. Some days are harder than others, but I know I made the right choice in leaving. I've gone completely no contact with Clark except regarding the kids, and even then only through our court-appointed communication app. When people ask what happened to our marriage, I'm no longer ashamed to tell the truth. He made his choices, and now we all have to live with the consequences. Thank you all for supporting me through this nightmare. The advice and encouragement from this community helped me stay strong when I wanted to give up. If anyone else finds themselves in a similar situation, trust your gut and don't let anyone gaslight you into accepting unacceptable behavior. You deserve better.